Everyone celebrates the American dream until someone actually achieves it. I lived that paradox firsthand. When I was sleeping on the gym floor with my blanket and pillow visible in the corner, I was the underdog everyone loved to support. My clients would walk in, see my makeshift bed, and say, "Good for you, chasing your dream." They signed up specifically to help me succeed. But 9 months later, after I'd hired staff and promoted a manager, everything shifted. I remember walking into that same lobby and hearing, "Oh, boss man's here," with an edge of resentment. Suddenly, I wasn't good enough for them anymore. The whiplash was jarring because these were the exact same people who had cheered me on. That's when the truth crystallized. People want you to do well, but not better than them. The cruelest part of pursuing any significant goal is that it never approaches as quickly as you expect. You only see people at the moment of their triumph, never the decade of failures that preceded it. When someone finally succeeds and others say, "Must be nice," or "overnight success," it stings because every single failure along the way went unnoticed. Nobody cares when you fall. People only take notice when you win, and even then, they often discredit it. This dynamic actually reinforces an important truth. If everyone looks like an overnight success, it means the 10 years they spent being terrible at something went completely unseen. The fear that people will notice your failures is absurd because they'll barely register when you actually succeed. The fundamental challenge of personal development and entrepreneurship is fighting without knowing when the end will come. The only certainty I can offer is that every person who has gotten through that grueling period experienced the exact same uncertainty you're feeling. What most people fundamentally misunderstand is how hard work actually functions. It's not that the work itself is intellectually complex. It's the continuous, unending focus on one thing while noticing the microscopic details that separate mediocrity from greatness. If you can't identify those differences, that gap itself represents your opportunity, and hard work is what reveals it. Most people measure their effort against the hardest they've personally worked, not against the actual amount of work required to achieve the outcome they claim they want. There's a massive disconnect between their expectations and reality. Once you become truly great at one thing, you experience a sobering realization about just how many hours and how much focused effort excellence demands. Then comes the moment that fundamentally changed my perspective. You understand that you can only be genuinely great at a very small number of things in your lifetime. Real discipline emerges when you accept that achieving exceptional skill in one domain will consume 5 to 7 years of intense, focused work. You must consciously choose the 2 or 3 things that justify that investment. I've come to terms with being a beacon of relentless hard work. That's the never-ending cycle of excellence. When I wake up each day, there's only one voice I need to listen to, which simplifies everything. Just do it for yourself. Someone once told me, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, and that's become one of my favorite principles. How many times have you known exactly what needed doing, then spent excessive time avoiding it, only to finally do the thing and realize it took far less time than expected? Even worse, it took less time than all the procrastination. If you just started with what you were supposed to do, you could have completed 4 or 5 other necessary tasks in that same window. I focused intensely on shrinking the time between waking up and starting work, and between finishing one task and beginning the next. You don't need 30 minutes of preparation to start working. You can simply start, and once you pull that thread, you find your momentum. All that time spent getting ready to work wastes your peak mental capacity on activities that contribute nothing meaningful. The vast majority of business owners work substantial hours, but they work on the wrong things using ineffective methods. They get so little return for their effort that when they're lying in bed empty-handed, they genuinely wonder why success eludes them despite working hard. But I define work by output, which equals volume multiplied by leverage. How many repetitions do you complete, and how much return does each repetition generate? The work smart versus work hard debate is a false choice. You do both. You complete as many repetitions as physically possible with maximum leverage on each one. If I make 100 phone calls, my skill level provides the leverage. With superior skills, those 100 calls might yield 10 times more results than someone with less developed abilities. But skill only develops through doing more work, creating a virtuous cycle where doing more makes you better, which increases your per-action return. I learned about the rule of 100 on steroids from someone who owned 13 or 14 highly successful gyms. He called it open to goal, meaning his managers worked from opening until they hit their target. Sometimes they achieved their goal by noon and could leave. Other times they worked from 5 in the morning until midnight because that's how long goal achievement required. I've observed this pattern across high achievers in every domain. They shoot free throws until they make 100. They run until they hit a specific milestone. They practice presentations until they execute without any mistakes. The more times you do what's required to get what you want, the more times you actually get it. When nobody's watching, I work harder than when they are. Framing it this way creates a persistent internal scorecard, a third-party observer telling me that when nobody's watching, I have to work even harder, otherwise I'm completely full of shit. This creates a continuously reinforcing cycle where I hold myself accountable for pushing to see how much I can endure. With each challenge I overcome, I witness my own capabilities expanding. As long as you keep moving forward, you bear witness to what you're truly capable of. I find that incredibly satisfying, even in the trenches of misery. Hard work itself is the goal, not a means to something else. As soon as you add "so that" to work hard, the thing after "so that" becomes your actual goal. But if the goal is to work as hard as possible, then the only real output is who you become along the way. That's something measurable every single day, in real time, throughout each day. How hard am I working? That's the question, because work is the goal. When I look back on my life, the days I loved most were days when I had nothing left in the tank. So the goal becomes emptying the tank completely, not reaching any particular destination, just driving the vehicle as hard as possible. Initially, it's just straightaways, seeing how high you can rev the engine. As you become more advanced, you navigate turns, then turns with elevation changes, then turns and elevation without guardrails because now risk enters the equation. The fascinating thing about measuring how hard you work is that you're the only person who can judge your success. You're the only one who knows how much you truly had left in the tank. There's an enormous time delay between when you start behaving like a winner and when you actually start winning. The problem intensifies with bigger mountains to climb. The larger the goal, the longer the delay between adopting winning behaviors and seeing winning results. Most people don't get fast enough feedback to confirm they're on the right path while taking those critical first steps toward a massive goal. They forget that huge goals come with proportionally longer delays. Every condition of business growth involves pain. Growing is painful. Stagnating at a plateau without knowing what to do is painful. Declining without solutions is painful. All conditions of reality involve pain, which means pain is simply a prerequisite for being alive. It's not a problem to solve, but a signal that you're breathing. Once you internalize that, pain becomes irrelevant. Initially, you think feeling bad should influence whether you do what you're supposed to do. Then you realize you can do the necessary thing despite feeling bad, and you start strengthening that capacity. The ultimate evolution happens when you don't even consider how you feel. It's not even a thought. You just do what needs doing. Champions interpret anxiety as excitement. If you're excited to step up, you're amped rather than stressed, even though the physiological experience is identical. Framing completely transforms your emotional experience when performing. My perspective is that if you're feeling significant anxiety about something, you probably need more practice. That applies to everything. Meetings, presentations, emails, book releases. If you feel nervous before releasing something, you likely didn't work on it enough. To eliminate anxiety about any task, you must repeat it so many times that by your final iteration, you're bored of it. You don't want to see it again. You're sick of it. That's the point where you'll have no adrenaline response because you've done it so many times you could do it in your sleep, and honestly, you hate it by then. If we think of confidence as the percentage likelihood that what we think will happen actually happens, then building confidence requires accumulating proof that our predictions are accurate. The easiest way to do that is repetition. It's reasonable to feel confident something will go as planned because it has consistently gone that way before. The leading indicator of a successful person is their ability to act without immediate results. When you continue down that path, success happens slower than you expect, then faster than you can imagine. That's the part everyone misses. They expect the faster than you can imagine phase and imagine really big outcomes, so their expectations become unrealistically large and immediate. They apply appropriate intensity but pair it with a completely inappropriate timeline. The path of personal development is fundamentally about befriending uncertainty. You must be the person rooting for yourself before anyone else does. Usually, it's a single clap echoing in an empty auditorium for an extended period. It's a slow clap that's only you, rooting for yourself. Most people feel profoundly lonely when wanting something that doesn't currently exist. Some call that dreams, others call it goals. Whatever the label, You're trying to pull something from your imagination into reality, and you want it done a specific way. If it's not done that way, it's not what you envisioned. People on the outside throw stones and call you names they believe will change your behavior and make you stop. The more I've been the person trying to pull things into reality, the more I've built defenses against those attacks. When stones get hurled at you through accusations of being a control freak, micromanaging, or having impossibly high standards, my answer is simply yes, because I want it done right the first time. People criticize because it helps them justify the risks they chose not to take. They hope their criticism will dissuade you from taking those risks so you'll end up in the exact same position as them, which would validate their decision not to try. There's an uncomfortable period when you change anything because everyone around you wants you to fit within the label they're comfortable with. They don't like when you evolve, so they attempt to shove you back into your old box. You'll have many awkward conversations during this transition. If you're experiencing this right now, I promise every single person who has done something meaningful with their life has gone through this exact chapter. It's the lonely chapter where you don't fit with your old friends anymore, but you haven't achieved enough success yet to fit into a new peer group. You're consuming content online, going through transformative experiences, wondering, is this even worth it? Because you have zero signs of success yet. If there's anything to take away from this, it's that the hate you receive along the way is actually a sign of success. What you absolutely cannot do is bend to that pressure and conform because it feels comfortable and warm. You've already been down that road and you know exactly where it leads. That's not where you want to be. The most reliable way to guarantee not having the life you want is doing what everyone else does. Unless you want what everyone else has, which nobody actually does. The skills you develop during those early, difficult days often provide enormous advantages later because you have context nobody else possesses. Rather than lamenting and hating the struggle, remember you're putting arrows in your quiver for slaying future, larger dragons. Expecting it to be easy makes it exponentially harder than it actually is. My personal goal is extracting every ounce of potential from whatever I have. If you feel like you have untapped potential remaining, it will eat you alive until you do something about it. One of the strongest mental frameworks that has carried me through my hardest times is thinking, this will be the story I tell one day. That means the harder the challenge, the bigger the dragon, the more epic the story becomes, and by extension, the more epic the hero. The difference between winners and losers is that winners define themselves by what they made happen, while losers define themselves by what happened to them. The difficult part of the lonely chapter is that the training montage in Rocky lasts 90 seconds in the movie but 5 years in reality. It's rarely the information or the intensity that makes things hard. It's the consistency. The desire to quit is simply breaking consistency, which is why consistency remains the hardest thing for most people to achieve. But the intensity required for success is actually much lower than most people expect. They often suffer significantly more in a short burst than what's actually required to succeed over a much longer time frame at much lower, sustainable intensity. Many people want to be exceptional but fear being an exception. That's wanting an outcome without accepting the requirements that outcome demands. We cannot do the same things everyone else approves of and somehow achieve different outcomes than everyone else gets. A significant portion of our identity comes from the proof we give ourselves through our past actions and words. If we want to build toward a different version of ourselves, it begins with stacking evidence that aligns with that future self. In many ways, taking the shot and getting rejected is a zero-loss game by choosing to begin. The business never works until the one that does. The episode doesn't take off except for the one that does. Whether it's 10 attempts or 10,000, eventually one succeeds. When you do more, you get better at doing, which is why not quitting is the single best skill and the only thing that truly matters. With an infinite game perspective, the entire objective is keeping the game going. Even if your goal was being number one in business, by what metric? Enterprise value, growth, profit, revenue? Suddenly, maybe it's being the richest person in the world. But for how long? Look at human history. Not one person has ever been the richest forever. Even if you touch the top, you're that one person for a moment, then it's gone again. You can't have that as an endpoint because it's inherently finite. But the competitor whose objective is to continue playing cannot be beaten because playing itself is winning. This is why everyone starting out needs enormous escape velocity to accumulate momentum. You're lifting off from total inertia where gravity is strongest, pushing past disbelief, criticism, the lonely chapter, and countless obstacles. You finally reach slightly higher altitude where you're floating more easily, and maybe your fuel provides better returns on velocity. Then people say, must be nice for you, and you think, If you could have seen the criticism, hard work, lonely nights, and struggle when nobody was watching, when I was chronically miserable and unsure of myself, when all my friends mocked me and I did all those things, I had to go through all of that for you to now say, must be nice. When nobody's watching, I work harder than when they are. The sign of success is the hate you get along the way. The only person who can judge your success is you because you're the only one who knows how much you truly had left in the tank. When you're stagnating in business at a plateau not knowing what to do, it's painful. When you're declining and don't know what to do, it's painful. All conditions of reality are painful. If pain is a prerequisite for reality, then it's simply a signal that you're alive. Rather than viewing pain as a problem, see it as a signal that you're breathing. It doesn't matter. You can work every hour of every day. People say, that's not healthy. And I respond, define healthy. I spend every minute doing as much as I possibly can of what I want to do. I work harder now than when I was poor, and I think it's because I've learned to enjoy it. Most people say, I wouldn't live my life that way, you're always working, but I'm actually always spending time in pursuit, and pursuit is my enjoyment button. I will do enough work that nothing remains to be done. Sometimes progress itself is the win. Maintaining during certain seasons is winning. This has been my major focus recently. Just winning the day. Bill Ackman had a brutal season going through divorce while losing $4 billion earlier in his career. One of the hardest parts of that period was having no single thing he could tackle in one day. You can't finish a divorce today. You can't undo a $4 billion loss today. When you face larger, more complex negative situations that do scale, how do you navigate through? For anyone listening who's experiencing a bad breakup, divorce, or a business with 10 things needing fixing, his tactical advice resonated deeply. He just tried to make progress, period. In a single day, progress is almost negligible. But at 30 days, you notice movement. At 90 days, the change becomes substantial. Does this mean our mood is still dictated by circumstances? Honestly, yes it does. Many of us hold this ideal of being in a great mood absent of reasons to be in a great mood. But I've been focusing on taking one great thing that happened and making that the thing that makes my entire day great. If I can make that great day, maybe it becomes a great week. Trying to expand those positive moments and let them consume the season while actively minimizing the negative moments and intensely focusing on those good times. I had that good moment. My day is made. I've had to completely recalibrate my entire scale for how small a thing can be that makes my day, my week, my month, my year. How crazy would it be if a year from now I say it was a great year? I'm putting enormous discretionary effort into this because I believe what will prevent me from achieving my ultimate goals, because that challenge isn't gone, is running out of steam. I don't need to do this. I don't need to work this hard. I prefer making the ride more enjoyable. If you want it all, life will give you nothing. We're willing to sacrifice everything we have for what we want. Then once we get what we want back what we sacrificed, which goes to the heart of the human condition. We want it all and we're not willing to make trades. One reason I've largely dismissed the deathbed regrets of most people is that they typically have the bias of wanting the other path without considering that path's cost. They say, I was really successful and did all these things, but I'd give it all up today to have my family. Well, you didn't, because you actually chose the path you were on and weren't willing to make that trade. What you're saying now is that you want it all. So does everyone. I've had several moments of clarity over the last year or so. We want everything without the cost. Everything has a price. You will never pay sufficient price on everything to achieve any level of success in any domain unless you're willing to trade from another domain. That understanding has significantly minimized my regret. We give up our 20s for our 30s. We give up our 30s for our 40s for our 50s. Then we trade everything we achieved in our 30s, 40s, and 50s to get back to our 20s. We give up the thing we have most of for the thing we have least of, and we give up the thing we want for the thing that's supposed to get it. I will become happy when I'm sufficiently successful, so I'll sacrifice my happiness pursuing success so I can finally be happy. We spend our 20s wanting to be richer, older, with a family. Then we start that in our 30s, gaining wealth and doing the family thing. We reach our 40s with more responsibilities and accumulated obligations, thinking, God, if only I could go back to my 20s. But you were miserable in your 20s. You hated it. You had no idea whether you'd be successful. You were constantly concerned about money, desperately needing validation, permanently dissatisfied. We already know how the movie ends when we look back wanting to relive it. You can't relive it under the same context because uncertainty is the largest part of the story. Perhaps golden years can only exist in our memory. Nobody believes they're living through a golden era right now. We never think we're in the good old days, but the good old days are always now. I've spent enormous mental resources accepting suffering and not treating something bad as something wrong. A huge amount of mental resources has gone into being faster at correcting the loop of, I am not happy with this particular thing, therefore something is wrong. I fix the story I tell myself to fix the thing. That's been super helpful, combined with understanding that everything I remember will always be better than it was. There's tons of science backing this up. We learn through reward and punishment. Punishment fades with time, no matter how severe. You get drunk, get hungover, swear you'll never drink again. 7 days later, you're drinking again. Why? The hangover punishment fades quickly. You're with somebody for a while thinking, this is crazy. You break up, then suddenly what do you remember? The good times because reward sticks. There's a hopeful message there. When you look back on your life, you'll disproportionately remember the good times. But it only becomes a problem if you lament the present, which is the only thing you've ever actually lived in. When I think about growing a business, I consider what could destroy it. This is Charlie Munger's principle. Invert, always invert. Einstein said it too. It's using a stronger horsepower engine. You can obviously think, how do I grow my business? But the alternative is, how would I absolutely destroy this business in the fewest possible moves? When you list those moves, you do the opposite. Honestly, some of my greatest creative moments have come from these apparently obvious things that would kill us. What if we did the even more obvious thing and did the opposite of what would destroy us? It's worked better than I deserve. Figure out what you want. Ignore others' opinions. Do so much work it would be unreasonable for you to fail. Realize it never mattered to begin with. Help others once you get there. You've already achieved the things you said would make you successful. The first 5 steps there constitute my master life plan. I had a terrible first work experience out of college, but from it I learned some of the most important life lessons I still carry today. That boss said one thing that stuck with me: figuring out what you want is 99% of it. Once you know what you want, getting it is the easy part. I adopted that as a worldview because once you're genuinely clear about what you want, everything that's not that becomes what you're willing to give up to get it. That thing can change, and that's the part people miss. We should all have permission to change what we want in any given moment, not suffering from sunk life cost bias where you've put 10 years into something. That was necessary at that time, and today you're willing to change everything. It's been helpful for me not to think of my changes as permanent because it's allowed me to make dramatic changes in my life and business much faster than most people have been willing to, because there's no way to forever on top of everything. I can do this for today, and tomorrow if it still works, I'll do it for tomorrow. If 5 days or 25 days from now working this way doesn't serve me, I take a day. People say, he's burned out. No, I took a day because that's what I needed that day. Giving myself permission to have that freedom has allowed me to take significantly faster action because who am I apologizing to? One of my themes this year has been focusing on moments, both positive and negative. When I think back on the last year, I don't remember probably 95% of it. I did the same things, so it just didn't get recorded. Nothing notable happened. When we think about a year, we really just recall a handful of moments, and those moments are usually very short. I've been trying to think about bad seasons as maybe not actually bad seasons. Maybe I had 5 bad days, or really 5 bad moments that I then thought about for the entire season and turned what would have been 5 minutes times 5 into an entirely bad year. If we can do that in the negative, can we do it in the positive, which is obviously the thing to exercise? If I were to boil everything down, if all the skills you can learn eventually become irrelevant, then the single greatest skill you can develop is being in a great mood in the absence of things to be in a great mood about. Most people don't question someone in a bad mood. I'm just in a bad mood. Well, if you're going to be in a bad mood for no reason, you might as well be in a good mood for no reason because that one at least serves you. I've been trying to exercise. On one side, there's counting things to be grateful for. On the other side, why do I have to have things to be grateful for in order to be in a good mood? Why is finding things a requirement of being in that mood? Can I not find things and still choose to be in a good mood? I've certainly not had things to be in a bad mood about and been in a bad mood. I've been trying to flex that capacity. Sure, we can find things to be grateful for, and when those things pop up, Yes, of course it's a practice you get better at, but what if I can just be in a good mood? I've tried breaking that relationship between the two because it makes mood contingent on something I can find. To take this to the absolute extreme, why should I be grateful? Why should I be happy? Why do I demand of my life that I must be happy during it? Comes down to control. If you can predict, it means you can control. If you can predict what's going to happen, you know what the variables are and you can influence those variables, which means influencing the outcome. We have behaviors or skills that will increase the likelihood of goal achievement, whatever that goal is. Being spiritual, being a good husband, whatever it is, these behaviors will do that. To increase the likelihood of doing these behaviors, I need more good stuff, less bad stuff. I will die on that hill. Beyond that, what is anything that happened prior to this matter at all? It only matters insofar as I can use that same variable and use it again to change my behavior yet again to be conducive to the goal. The expectation of life is holding happiness hostage until the $1 billion, until marriage to the love of your life, until these things happen. What if something small could be something great? People only root for others at 2 times. First, when they're at the beginning of the race. Second, when they finish. Neither is when you need it. So you have to master the middle, the boring, exhausting, soul-crushing middle. That's where winning happens on your own. People will only cheer for you as long as you can't beat them at the game they value most. Every person who doubts you is right until they aren't. It's a bug, not a feature. At the very beginning, people say, "I'm really excited for you that you're trying this thing out." I noticed everyone was very happy for me to try because I temporarily decreased my status. I actually became worse than them during that period. As soon as I achieved a level of success, I realized their happiness for me was proportional to where they were on the ladder relative to me. As soon as I passed some people, they stopped being happy and started saying bad things. The people still ahead kept saying, "Keep it up," and there are still people who've been that way my whole life. I wonder if when I pass them, will they flip? I don't know. After you start the race, you quickly pass people who've done nothing. But then you have this long period where you don't catch up to people who've been doing it for a long time. That's the very lonely part because you have to leave your initial group at some point. But you don't get to the new group that's way ahead with proof behind them where you can actually sit at the table. Today, if I were to do something, I have tons of support, but I don't really need the support now. I needed it in the middle, in the many years when no one knew who Alex was. That's the hard part. It's Morgan Housel's story. You just don't know how it's going to finish. That's what makes it hard, the uncertainty. What if I give up everything I've done in my life for nothing? And if I knew that, I wouldn't be willing to make this trade. But in retrospect, when you do have the thing, you're like, of course, if I knew this was going to happen, I would happily make the trade. But you don't know, so you're just putting the money down and rolling. But you find out if you hit black 5 years from now. Dealing with uncertainty is such a meta skill. To be honest, it's one I really struggle with. I'm very not good at dealing with uncertainty. My required line of assurance in order to commit to a decision is incredibly high, which is why I've basically never failed at anything I've done. All my accomplishments have been a string of incredibly slow but very reliable successes, just because my required number of justification points is very high. In retrospect, it might look like risk. Dude, I took so long to make this decision. On the friend point, it's a painful realization that the small number of good friends want you to win in case you take them with you. The large number of bad friends are scared of you winning in case you leave them behind. The best way to know who a real friend is how they react when you win. When that happens, you'll realize how few real friends you really have. Many people were like, "Sure, good luck with that," but I knew they weren't really rooting for me. They were rooting for me to fail. They're rooting for me the wrong way. One of my rules is you should only take advice from people whose dreams for your life are bigger than yours are, which is a very small number of people. Sometimes it's your parents. Sometimes parents really do have bigger dreams for you than you do. The people closest to you in the beginning, if they're true actual friends, you recognize that because they actually want you to win. That's amazing. A lot of people don't have that. What I felt, at least for me, was that when you're a little ahead is where the friction is. When you blow them out of the water and there's no question, it's beyond reproach, they'll do one of 2 things. They'll either be really happy for you or they'll change the game they're beating you at. That's great, but I'm in better shape. That's great, but my marriage is better. Whatever game they choose to play. People who doubt you will be right most of the time. This further increases your uncertainty about the path you're choosing. But on a long enough time horizon, Most people who don't bet are guaranteed to lose. They get to win at being right more times than you win at being right. But that equation doesn't take into consideration intensity. Can I be so right one time that it makes all the times I was wrong irrelevant? In the nature of life, the answer is yes, almost a resounding yes for just about every domain. Everyone can say every person you've ever dated has sucked and predict you're going to break up until you find the person you're going to marry. In that moment, who cares about the other 90 people you went on dates with that everybody said were bad ideas or that you have a bad picker? You're not marrying them. The first thing I ever did was an online fitness thing and it kind of worked, then my first gym kind of worked, then all these other side projects. I got distracted and didn't know. The downside risk is significantly smaller and more frequent, both. You're more likely to lose and it's more likely to happen more times. It's just that upside is uncapped. There's this guy who wrote Jingle Bells. He had the most tragic life you can imagine, failed at everything his entire life, amounted to nothing. He just happened to write this small thing called Jingle Bells, and it's become the #1 song at Christmas, maybe globally. I think about that life. What if I failed at everything but then had one thing that makes a permanent impact? Would I trade that life for Aristotle's good life where I amount to nothing but the whole time was good? This is one of my eternal battles with myself that I have no answer for, to be clear. But when I'm thinking through periods where things suck, maybe I'll get a Jingle Bells out of this. Maybe it'll just take 20 years longer than I thought. Not taking the shot is like saying, life, I don't want to scratch off this lottery ticket. But the lottery ticket's free. Why would you not scratch it off and try? Whatever reasons we usually give ourselves in the beginning for why we can't achieve something, you can almost always find not only someone, but someone who's achieved world-class levels of success with worse conditions than you currently have, which means it's absolutely possible. And the only thing it takes to get there is work.